Marcelo, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. How have you been?
Very good, Nick. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here, and and talking about my favorite subject of film scores. So.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you just scored Journal for Jordan, which came out, I think, a week or two ago.
Yeah.
But you saying that film scoring, film music's your favorite subject. I want to focus on that really quick. You had a background in composing and classical music, trained as a pianist, and then after that, your music world just kind of exploded in scope. So how did all of that find its way to film music?
Well, I fell in love with music through film music. I mean, that's when I was a kid. That's what I loved. I wasn't even sure. I didn't know that there was a job. I just remember. I think it comes down to my love of cinema and film in general, and just always just being, completely mesmerized by films, and I started doing music, and a lot of it had to do with just what I was hearing on the films, and I was like, wow, that is cool because it, as you know, the music for films. First of all, it could be anything from straight ahead classical music to rap and anything in between. There was something about the uh, how varied, stylistically it was, but also I think ultimately, the real thing for me is just that fusion of the visual and the audio, and I feel like there's something very primal about it, that goes back towards the cave people, kind of hearing stories in the dark, and kind of, and I feel like that there's something very that is very close to my soul about it, and that's how as I said, how I fell in love with music was, I would hear these pieces and try to figure out what they were, pieces from the movies of my childhood, and then little by little I learned, wow, there is actually somebody's writing that music, and whoa, there's a job of doing that, and I think it went right, hand in hand with my love of film and of storytelling in general.
Hmm. It's funny how many well-known composers now have that experience of growing up as kids, not even knowing that that was a job.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I mean, yeah, it was just like, I mean, it's so far. I grew up in Brazil, and I mean, my family's not in the business at all, and it was just everything was very, very far. But then, as you get interested in something, you start to read and learn more about it, and as I got a little bit older, I started to seek out certain composers that I thought were interesting in their music. But at first, it was really just about that uniting of that, the drama and the story with music, and how that makes you feel.
well, and this is gonna show my ignorance of Brazilian films, besides a very small
Yeah.
handful. But growing up in Brazil, did it? Were you watching like American and British films? Was there a Brazilian industry too, or if not, did that kind of make composing for film seem even more distant?
Well, it definitely felt very distant. There was an industry of it's kind of a funny thing to say, a little risque, but it's the truth. When I was growing up in the 70s, the majority of the Brazilian film, with a few notable exceptions of like very artsy stuff, was actually kind of sort of soft porn kind of stuff. I mean, that's really, there was a name that they called porno chanchada, and it was so that, to answer your question, I didn't really watch a lot of Brazilian films growing up. There were a handful that were amazing, but what was like in most theaters, it was pretty crappy, and actually I couldn't even have gone anyways because it was, inappropriate for my age. So I grew up really with American and British and European film in general. Those are, like everywhere else. Luckily in Brazil, they didn't dub films. It was always with subtitles. So certain countries to this day still people watch American films dubbed in their language. I never really did that, and I'm glad because I find that the language is so important, and whatever the language that is spoken originally for a story and for a film.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that I really do appreciate about Brazil is that I grew up as a big metalhead, and
Hmm.
for whatever reason, so many metal bands are just
But
huge in Brazil. And
yes,
one of my favorite bands growing up was a band called Sepultura. And
Sepultura, of course. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, we love. There was and Sepultura was also coming out of at this time when there was a period of time when Brazilian rock was the most popular music in Brazil. And I actually participated in that. I used to play in a band in my teens. So in the 80s, and Sepultura was kind of already big, but Sepultura became huge outside of Brazil first, and then he kind of like
really.
went back. Yes, I mean yeah, they really kind of made their name outside of Brazil, but the public always loved heavy metal. I mean, I remember one of the formative experiences of my life was going to the first Rock in Rio, and we had like Iron Maiden and Queen and all these bands were playing. I think AC/DC too, and along with other. It was a very eclectic kind of thing, but I mean, they had literally like in the same building they would have like Iron Maiden, I think Ozzy Osbourne, then James Taylor, and Al Jarreau. It was this very random kind of mix, but it was cool. And people, one thing I think it's pretty well known is that how much music is a huge thing in Brazil.
Yeah.
It's people love music, all kinds of music, and it's a big part of it. I remember reading even recently that in the my city of São Paulo, more people will have attended a live music event than film in
Huh.
any given week. Now that counts also being in a bar and somebody's playing the guitar,
Right.
but it's so ingrained, and so music is a huge part of the Brazilian soul, and I feel very lucky to have been born there and being exposed to all this great stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome. It sounds like a great place musically to have come up. And honestly, I could ask you about just that aspect
Yeah,
and Brazilian rock and metal in the 80s and 90s, but
yeah.
if we had a couple hours maybe, but we could move on a
Um,
little bit.
yeah, okay.
um, yeah, so Journal for Jordan just came out, like I said, a week or two ago. When this airs, it'll have been out for probably just under a month. And I think that's actually your second collaboration with Denzel Washington, who
Correct.
directed this. I think your first one was Fences, which came out in 2016.
Right.
So how did that relationship start? How did you get involved with him as a director?
Well, it was, as you said, on Fences is when I met him. I had never met him. I had worked with one of the directors that is very associated with Denzel, which is was Antoine Fuqua,
Hmm.
who I still work with to this day with, and a very dear friend and collaborator. But actually, it didn't come through Antoine. Now, I thought that for a time, I used to, well, maybe Antoine put a good word for me. But by the time Denzel and I met, I mean, he hadn't made that connection. So it really was the old school way. I sent some music, a demo reel. I knew the play Fences. I love August Wilson, and when I was in college, I've studied that play not as a performer, but just the text. And I always when I heard that they were doing a film of it, I went crazy and went to my agent and was like, we got to figure out a way to get some music there. But these things 99% of the time, somebody like Denzel would have had already a composer and a relationship, and lots of the stars really have to align, and they did align in that case. I put in all this music that I thought it might be kind of, pertinent to the film, and even though I had no idea what he was looking for musically, and he really enjoyed the music. And the producer Todd Black also heard the music and was really pro, and so I was summoned to go to Paramount and meet Denzel, and it was really amazing. I mean, once I knew I was going to meet him, and I was like really quite nervous. It's Denzel, and just that voice, that we all know so well. And luckily, I had worked with a few actor directors before. One of my earlier sort of breakthrough movies was The Good Shepherd, which was directed by Robert De Niro. So I remember meeting De Niro, also another titan of film, and kind of realizing they're as a director, they're they're interested in you. That's why you're there. So I kind of calmed myself down, and I went to Paramount, and first I watched the movie. I went into a empty theater, and they played the whole cut of Fences for me, and I was floored. I remember after the screening, somebody came to kind of take me and said, "Okay, I need a couple minutes to just sort of collect my thoughts here." It was quite an overwhelming experience to watch that film. There's just something about that story, and I think the level of artistry that Denzel brought to Fences, and I mean his acting, I mean his and Viola Davis and everybody. I mean, it's truly. I felt like when I was watching, I was like, okay, these are two actors at the absolute top of their game.
Yeah.
At the height of their thing, and you better don't mess this up. But then I went and talked to him, and I met with him in the cutting room with the editor Hughes Winborn, who is his longtime editor, and we had a great chat. And one of the things about that I learned right then with Denzel is that he talks sort of around the subject. He's not the person that is going to sit down and say, okay, so what did you think of the film? What do you think the music should be? It was more like, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? And kind of like he's very, very, very smart about it. He kind of directs the conversation without you even realizing it. And we talked about it. And I think one of the things that I said, and I think it was a little bit maybe even he wanted to test my convictions. He was like, do you think that this music should be jazzy or anything, being that it's August Wilson and it's an African American story? And I said, no, I don't think so. And I really felt that. I said, I feel like this is a universal story, and the music should be, I think the story is true in Pittsburgh where it was conceived, but also somebody in Japan will watch this movie, and in India and in Brazil, and will get all the things, because ultimately it's about family, and it's about love and family and regrets and all these things that are universal. So he was very happy about it. I mean, I've learned over the years that you want to really speak your mind. You always win when you're being honest and sincere with what you're saying. So that, I think, was a real plus. And then we finished the meeting, and he said, okay, great. We're meeting a couple more people. We'll be in touch. And a week later, I heard that I got the job, and I was like, oh my God, and it was a great process all along with Fences, and to go to Journal for Jordan. One of the things that was unique about it was how little music there was in Fences, because there was so much dialogue. And so the score was 35 minutes, and the first cue didn't come in until over half an hour into the film is the first cue. I never worked in a film like that. So when we started Journal for Jordan, the first thing we did was Denzel sent me the script, said, read it, and then let's meet and talk about it. This was like in the middle of the pandemic, so everything was so complicated, but we did meet in person. He is somebody that really, really, he appreciates the importance of eye-to-eye contact, and I think as being such a great performer, or whatever the reasons are, he wanted to meet me in person, even though we had already worked on something. And of course I went, and we met, and we talked about Journal for Jordan, my impressions of the script, and I thought that it was going to be a lot more like Fences in terms of like very little music and very sparse, and it's all about the acting, and that's how we set out to do it. After our meeting, as I was leaving, he's like, great, I look forward, can't wait to see what you're going to come up with. So, I was hired, and this was a couple months before they started to shoot. So I had a lot of time to really think about it, because a lot of the times composers were brought in after they're done shooting, when they're more or less a few weeks or maybe halfway through the cut, maybe more through the editing process. And, in this case, I had all this time before, and I was like, what am I going to do? I want to start to write. And so one of the things that was different about Journal for Jordan is that I asked, because there was no cut, I said, can I watch the dailies? And at first, the studio was, on the dailies for some of the people that are watching that might not know all the terminology, is basically the raw footage of a film. All of the takes without being cut, scene by scene. Sometimes there will be a scene you'll have 5 different camera angles of the same scene. So it's not something you really get a sense of the film, how it really flows, but you get a sense of what it looks like. And coincidentally, the first thing that they shot was all of the sort of military stuff. They went to a military base in California and shot everything. Then it was almost 2 months before they got back and shot the rest of the film. So at first, all I saw were the dailies of the military stuff. And one of the things that stuck with me was all this amazing drone footage that there was of the base and of the mountains. And I started to really, that kind of really captured my imagination. And it was a really interesting thing because I had never really been offered dailies to watch in a project. And I think it's something that I'm definitely gonna, be asking from now on, because you kind of get a sense for the movie without being too sort of constrained by the scenes and what it's doing, and you just get a sense of what it looks like in a very general way. And I ended up writing a couple of themes that actually were integral themes to the score and were used, even though I wrote them not to picture. Then they actually cut a couple of sequences to those themes, and we changed it around a little bit. But so by the time I really got going, after they were done shooting, there was already some of my music was in the cut. So it was a very, very natural process of him already being used to my music from a previous project, but then even from this project. And then it was a very, you have to work very hard with Denzel. He's not messing around. He expects absolutely everybody to be at their A game, but he gives you what you need. And throughout the process, every time I've worked with him, he's always very often will check in and say, "Are you okay? Do you have what you need? Do you need more time? Do we need more communication from me?" He's very, very, but then he lets you do your job. And I think from having worked with all of the greatest directors, basically, that there are, he values, I think he values the idea of giving freedom to your collaborators, but also direction. And so then, when they were done shooting, they were cutting in LA. I would come once a week to the cutting room, and we would look at 1 or 2 cues at a time, not very, very gradual. And it was the perfect kind of sort of working environment where I tried things. Some of them would work, some of them wouldn't, but it was always very positive and very kind of, all about pointing out what's working and trying to build on that. And over the course of, 3-4 months, next thing we know, by the time they were done cutting and they had a locked picture, the score had been written, not recorded, but I had composed it already.
I mean, there are so many things in that I love. Not just giving you the space to work, but particularly the time as well. There have been, I mean, there have been great scores that have been written in a week or a couple weeks, but giving a composer the time to actually really sink their teeth in, think about it. I always think that's just the best way to go. So it's always so encouraging to hear, directors doing that today.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing with him is that, you could almost extrapolate that idea and say, wow, then maybe we could spend a year working on the score. But there's also such a thing as like when things get overbaked, and kind of, so what I saw with Denzel is that he gives you what you need, and the movie as a whole, and I'm one of the departments, but for everybody is the same. You get what you need, but he's not going to say, okay, I'll give you 8 months to write the score. He gives you what you need, not more. And I think at any point, if I had gone and said, listen, we're having a hard time, we need more time, he would have obliged. But he's also not somebody there's no excess going on. He's serious about film. He loves film. He loves to talk about it. He loves to have a tight crew and talk about it. And but he's not somebody that is interested in the bling of it all, and like, oh, I mean, he would call me on, directly on my phone. There was, he was very kind of direct that way, and he knew and knows the power of just keeping your crew that you trust right there. And we would meet. Of course, it was during COVID. Everybody was being tested every week, and we're all vaccinated. But we were in person doing this, and which is not an easy thing to accomplish in the age of COVID, but it was very important to him that's the part that I think he really put his foot down with the studio or whatever, was like, okay, we are going to do this how it's meant to be. It's not going to be done via Zoom. We're going to meet and we're going to talk about it and do it in the way that is most conducive to creativity.
Well, and you had said that it seems like a lot of that comes from his experience as an actor working with probably every great modern director the last however many decades.
Yeah.
But with the actual sound of the score, I think his wife is a pianist,
Right.
and do you think that has an influence in the palette that ended up finding its way into the score?
He loves piano. He knows I'm a pianist. As you said, his wife is a very, very accomplished pianist, and it's interesting because piano is almost like it's an extension of my hand or something. I've been playing my whole life, and so many of my scores, piano plays a big part. And I think one of the things is that there is a level of expression that I can achieve on piano that I can't achieve on anything else, because it's right there. There's no communication. It was interesting because Journal for Jordan ended up having a lot of piano, and I recorded all of the pianos at Sony, the big studio there where we later recorded the orchestra, with Denzel sitting like a few feet away from me in the thing. And at first I was like, whoa, this is gonna be something. But he's very respectful, and he was really digging it. He loves music. A lot of the times in a meeting, we would be talking. He said, "Oh, have you heard this?" and play me some songs that maybe his kids had shown him, or some old tune that he likes. And his music is really, really important to him. And also another thing that was very interesting and completely unique to the process in this film, at least my experience, is that he would listen to the score a lot on its own. So what we would do is that we created a playlist. Actually, it was not even a playlist, it was a CD, so he could play it on his car. So as the cues would get approved, we would give him in the end of every week, every meeting, a CD. At first, there were like 5 tracks in it, and then he kept going more and more in the order of the film. And he would listen to it once or twice a day on his way to and from the cutting room. So he really knew the music, like to an extent that sometimes he would mention things, say, "Oh, that's interesting. This cue, it's a similar motif to what's happening, in Rio 1." And sometimes it was not even a conscious thing, but he could hear it. And it was interesting to, again, going back to the idea of having enough time. I mean, sometimes, like when I'm working on a TV show, for instance, there is no time for anything. Everybody's running as fast as they can. The showrunner has to, or the director, whoever it is, will have to listen to 12 cues and give their thoughts right there and then. And there was none of that. He was able to kind of let the music sink into his soul and his brain and his ears. And he has incredible, incredible ears. I saw on Fences, where he could hear things, very high register stuff. I mean, in a different parallel world, Denzel would have been an incredible musician or conductor or something, and he really has a very, very finely attuned ear to details. And so it was, again, it was all about the process and all about him, getting to know the music and then contributing and suggesting things. And I, it was, I'm not going to say it was easy, because that would not be true, but it was very smooth and felt very, very safe, to the way that we went about it. And I felt like I could really bring my A game, and always would only show him things that I felt extremely strongly about, that they were good. He might like them or might not, but sometimes you don't have time, and you have to just go as far as you can and show the stuff. And in this case, I would have time. I would write a cue, and maybe I might stop and kind of go work on something else, come back after a couple of days. There was the way that it more how it used to be, in a sense. I mean, film has become more and more like TV in a way that people, the deadlines and the schedules get more and more compressed, and composers are asked to do more and more with less time. So when you get what everything you need is a real breath of fresh air.
I always get so envious of people like that who seem to have an infinite amount of talent in all these different areas. And
Yeah.
I know for working as a composer on film, it can be a double-edged sword of having a director who's a musician or is musically gifted or has an ear like that. Sometimes they kind of are a little more combative or overbearing because they have that experience. And it sounds like this was the opposite, where he knows that you're the composer, like this is what you do, and he's there to to help, to push back when he thinks it's appropriate, but not to the extent that it's just creating this disaster to work in.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a key part. He would talk to me, even though he's very, very well versed in music. He would always talk to me in terms of the drama, in terms of where are we at in the story. One of the big things with him is when to hold back, and kind of like to not give the game away very soon. And kind of as an actor, I mean, I remember after working on Fences, going and back, and every time I see him on screen now, I think of how much of that skill that he has, that intensity, but it's never very loud. I mean, Denzel, in the movies, he can be super scary, talking very quietly, like on Man on Fire or something, or it's so there is this sense of like he talks to you like he would talk to an actor. And I think all the great directors I've worked with have that in common. They understand that, you don't want to say, hey, change that chord to a minor chord there. That's not the point. The point is, this might be a little too much here. Maybe we need to pull back and let's open up here, and, and kind of deal with it as storytelling, which is what it really is.
Well, in talking about kind of restraint and intensity, I think that really does kind of flow through into the score as well, because there is, as you mentioned earlier, a military aspect to it, and there is quite intense human emotional drama, but there's never a point where the score is matching that same intensity as far as something you'd hear in like an action film or in recent film like Dune, where
Yeah.
it's just loud too and overwhelming. And here it's at the end of the day, no matter what's happening on screen at any given moment, it's recognizing that this is really a deeply personal drama among three people.
Exactly. It's a human story. It was very important. I remember at first when I was, started it, I was really in my mind, I hadn't really done a war movie, and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But from the very beginning, when we talked about it, he was very clear that the war was, whatever music was going to happen during that part of the story was going to be more impressionistic and more, and very spiritual. Denzel is an extremely spiritual person. And also, I mean, I think that when he talks about film, at least in my experience, he's talking about the drama and some of the technical things, but there's a lot about spirituality that goes on. On Fences, we really talked about it, and but this one even more, because it is a spiritual story. And I very early on in our conversations, I said, I think that the person we have to really focus here the most is Jordan, because he is the key to this whole story, even though we don't spend as much time with him as we do with the parents. But there is a spiritual aspect of the story of like a father speaking from the beyond to his son, and knowing that he might not be there to talk in person, and there's this element of talking from another dimension, and kind of and again, like, I think that Denzel is a spiritual man, a religious man, and he wanted that to be part of the score. He wanted it to and again, not in a, oh, let's add choir, and not,
Yeah.
it's never in a religious way. It's more in a spiritual way, and kind of thinking about how these characters came into being in each other's life, but mostly how is this father going to be communicating really important things to his son when he's not around anymore. And so that was the other element that he talked a lot about.
But I think that goes back to a point you mentioned much earlier, talking about fences and not having a jazz score to maintain that universality. I think that works the same here. If you had something that was very like gospel or choir based,
Yeah.
it focuses much more on the religious aspect that isn't universal to everybody. For
Exactly.
for me, I'm obviously very different from the characters in the film, but I had very similar experiences to Jordan. Actually, my father was in the military. He ended up passing away when I was a child from it as well, and so
Wow.
having all that unfold, like just having that, it's an integral part of the story. But everything else is different between us. Like, still resonated very emotionally with me, and I think other choices may have uh, dampened that impact. So I think, yeah, the the palette and the kind of genre choice of it matched it perfectly.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Wow, that's an intense thing that what you just shared. I mean,
Yeah.
that's amazing. It's you're absolutely right. I think the universality of it. I mean, I think that's why film is such a powerful medium. Is that people from all over can relate to the stories, and can relate to the drama, and to the mythology of it, and to the kind of the commonality. I mean, I think what makes a great artist like Denzel is that he can appeal to somebody that looks like him, or somebody that looks nothing like him, and because they're kind of cutting through the geographic part of it, and it's
Hmm.
more about what makes us human, and what unites us, and you're right. We never wanted it to be a story where, the military part, the element of the military that he's more interested in, was honestly was like the incredible sacrifice. I mean, and that's the part that he, when I first talked to him, about the project, I was like, well, it's interesting that, you know, I kind of was at first thinking of it politically, with Dana, the writer, being a very left leaning person, very liberal New York Times journalist. And Jordan, I assumed, would have been a more conservative person, part of the military. And he said, you know what? The kids in the military are not thinking about if they're Republicans or Democrats. They couldn't care less. They're there doing a job. A lot of them just want to see the world, and they want to kind of expand their horizons, but nobody's sitting there, saying, oh, this is a red or blue issue, and I think that part of the sacrifice, what these people, I mean, obviously in your case, your family paid the ultimate, price, and the highest sacrifice that there is, and as with Michael B. Jordan's character, but even outside of that, all the PTSD and all of the
Hmm.
all of the incredible sacrifices and the families, he pointed this thing out to me that the end of the movie, it takes place in Arlington, and they took a little bit of a liberty, because actually um, the top was the sergeant was not buried there. He was actually buried close to where his mother lived, but they did took a creative liberty to do the final scene at Arlington. But there are over 500,000 people buried in Arlington, and they're not. Some of them are the families, as well, which I didn't realize. but he really he it was very important to him to kind of portray the fact that it's, the sacrifices that are being made by the military are, they're very real, they're very immediate, and they have nothing to do with politics. Once you're there, and it's about survival, and about, like in the case of Jordan, for Jordan, protecting your troops and trying to bring them home safe, if you can, at whatever cost. And I think this aspect, that was the aspect of the military that was important to him. It was the sacrifice. It was not, oh, it was not some like naive, we're gonna go bring freedom and free this. It was nothing like that. It was really about how these people, put their behinds on the line, and kind of really give everything they got.
Well, that's something that I think surprised me a little bit, because you don't see it very often in military films. Quite often, it's like you said, it's one of those extremes or the other. And here it was very much like, no, we're going to go out of our way to ensure, like, this. We are not commenting on the political aspect of this. Like, we are focusing on the kinship and the importance that these men have to one another. Again, on the very personal human basis, which I appreciated. And similarly, setting it at Arlington, I don't think I've ever seen like almost a footnote in credits like that, where it explicitly points out, by the way, like, this aspect it's done in creative liberty, and I appreciated that. I think that's just like a level of respect, and pointing out the what's true versus what's just artistic merit is like something that you never see that.
It's true. He really had and has a deep respect for the people. And when we're in the opening of this film, when it premiered in New York, Dana Kennedy was there, the who wrote the story, and she was showing me some pictures of. They had been talking about this movie for 12 years or something, for a long time. There were pictures of Denzel when he did, what is that, Unstoppable, this Tony Scott film that took place in a train.
Yeah.
And this was a long time with Denzel, with Jordan on his lap. Like they were developing this thing. So it was very important for him to get it right, also in the eyes of the family. And I think another thing that I really loved was seeing a military family, and seeing where they are, and they're like, in many many ways, a typical American family. They happen to be in the military. Her dad was, all their friends are. But it was interesting to see this, this other world that we never really get to see very much, of what, the whole shebang. It's not just people, boots on the ground. I mean, there are families and there are lives and generations that are kind of affected one way or the other about this. And he really wanted to get that right, and went to great kind of care to make sure that they got the story and honored the story, in the correct way.
Yeah, and I think that comes through in the film, and again in the score as well, where it's just a much smaller portion of the score has that kind of military lean to it, but it's never it avoids kind of having a cliche, or again having this like inspiring, rallying rah side to it either. It avoids that too, which I think keeps it a bit more grounded and a bit more respectful.
I think so. And it was it was never like, oh, this is going to be fun, a fun adventure and all of that. And in many ways, like when it came down to the sequence where we actually see what happened, his whole point of view and what he wanted to focus was always, the spiritual, and this person is about to go and meet their maker, and kind of, it was never about like, look, there was somebody on the side of the road and a bomb exploded and they shot. It was all like about, in a sense, the whole sequence, when they're leaving the base and you see what happened, was kind of like a journey towards the beyond, and that's how
Yeah.
I saw it, and the way that it's shot, a lot of those aerial footages, it always feels like we're looking at this from a different plane, not from the ground. We're looking from above, and even when it came to the choices of instrumentation, I knew I wanted to somehow allude to the military aspect of his character because I mean he was a soldier. He really was a soldier, and he had no question about that. But instead of using trumpets and all of that, we use the French horn. It's a much lower instrument that still has that noble sound, but without ever being kind of, dun, 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 dun. It was never. It just was never what he was looking for.
No, I think that makes sense. And in wrapping up, what other respect aspect I wanted to talk about that's a kind of change, but it's also in the credits, is that it looked like basically every session musician was actually credited in the credits, which is something that I know I know a lot of composers, but I know a lot of musicians that play for film and other media, and that's one of the things that they complain about most is that they are never credited. And
Yeah.
when I was sitting through the credits in the theater, I saw I don't know 80 names or something
Yeah.
all scrolling through,
Yeah.
and I appreciated that.
Well, that was a policy for Sony. I mean, I'll give my hat off to the studio. They really are very
Mhm.
serious about first of all recording everything in LA or in the US, and using the American players and but also giving credit. It's kind of a new guideline I think that they have, and not every studio has it because many of them don't record here. But it was something that was there was no question. And it was not even like I said, hey, I want this because I know from having done this many times, you have only so much control over
Yeah.
and usually you try to pick, okay, here's three people that had a particularly strong, influence in the score. But in this case, from the very beginning, it said, no, everybody gets credit. And it was great. The sessions were amazing. Even in the middle of the pandemic, we're recording in this big place. I mean, without the care and testing and masks and all of that, but everybody was just so happy to be there, and also the players, when Denzel walked into the recording, I mean, people were like, they freak out. I mean, he's one of the most beloved, actors, filmmakers, in the world, really. And there's this very inspiring thing, and I think it's very important to him that everybody feels appreciated, and he would always go through great lengths to make sure that that's the case.
Yeah. I mean, and that's great. And that has to be such a surreal experience, no matter how many actors and directors and everyone that you meet. Like someone like Denzel is,
Yeah, it's
otherworldly.
it really is. He really is, and there's this charisma that is just very effortless and kind of and he's not. I'm not gonna say he's not intimidating. He doesn't try to intimidate you. I mean, he is who he is, and he also doesn't slow down for anyone. But it's all about this communication. I think that in the end of the day, he's somebody that recognizes things that are happening that are not visual, and that there's like again, as I said, like most of the time we talked about things around the subject, and that was always uh, afterwards I would think about what we were talking about and realize how you know it it affects or pertains to what we are doing in the score. But it's a lot of the times it's like this around the corner kind of thing.
That's great.
Yeah.
Marcel, I think that's a very positive, great place to
Yes.
wrap up. I don't want to take up too much more of your time,
Oh no, I'm
and
thrilled to be here.
I appreciate it, and I obviously I always love talking about film music, but I always love being reminded of some of my favorite bands like Sepultura. So I'll probably spend some of the afternoon listening to them or some of Max Cavalera's other bands too. So I love that.
Absolutely, some quiet listening of
Yeah, exactly.
Sepultura.
A nice relaxing Friday.
Yeah, great. Well, Nick, thank you very much for having me. It's an amazing, it's amazing to be talking in depth about this, and I appreciate the really smart questions and and really digging in deep into this process.
Oh, that means so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.